Hey guys, how are you? Okay, so we are going to talk about a couple things today. All right, yes, I am still struggling with COVID. It totally sucks, but I don't want to go too long without coming live and giving you guys some good information because I know a lot of you and your kiddos are just starting school. All right. So even though I'm fighting with COVID, I know you guys are getting ready to, be fighting for your IEP to be adequate and appropriate for your kids. So, excuse my background. I am like in my bed, trying to hopefully get better. Um, but it's taking longer than they say. Like, yes, Skylar. Okay. It's one of those things where they say 10 to 14 days, and it's been 10 days for me, and I'm still feeling horrible. Um, but that's neither here nor there. All right, so we're going to talk about a couple things. Adequate IEPs. All right, what does that mean? And how can you ensure that your child's IEP is adequate? Okay, so adequacy, if you will, goes hand in hand with is your child's, just kind of putting it in layman terms, is my child's IEP appropriate? Is it built around my child? Is it individualized? And is it specific enough in order for them to make progress? Okay. So, with that said, before I get started, post a 1 below if it's your first through third time catching me live. Post a 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. You guys know the drill. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Raven Woods. I'm the CEO and founder of Autism Mama Rocks, the IEP, and I help parents gain the knowledge and the confidence to become the CEO of their IEP meeting. And I took quite a bit of a break to take vacation and all of that fun stuff over the summer. And believe me, I was way past burnt out from last year. It was crazy. Um, and then, of course, this year is probably not going to be any better. Um, but so I'm glad I got that rest and relaxation. And then, of course, I end up with COVID. Go figure. It's just my luck, right? Um, but and all summer I had cases. It's crazy. I'm literally writing a request for due process right now in the state of Texas, in the area of Houston, which is right now. Um, and it's one thing after another when it comes to Houston, Texas right now. All right. They're just not doing what they're supposed to be doing with their kids. Hey, Rose, how are you? Welcome. Hey, Davinia, how are you? I messaged you a while back. Hello, Lori, how are you? Hey, Erin. Okay, so just like they did, post a 2 below if it's your first through third time catching me live. No, post a 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. Post a 1 below if it's your first through third time catching me live. Tell us where you're from. We want to know where you're from. Okay. So what does adequacy mean? So we're going to talk about your IEP being adequate. How does 504 and IDEA come into play if your IEP is not adequate? All right. Well, let me just explain that part first, because I always like to start at the back. Where are we trying to get to and move my way forward, So 504 and IDEA come into play if your IEP is not adequate, all right, based on the fact that it is a violation for the school districts to not assess your students and your child, a student and a child, in an area in which they should be assessed. All right, let's just take dyslexia. All right, so in the state of Texas alone, all right, they are actually a state that has not until recently been doing the evaluations in which they should, to somewhat get to the conclusion that the student has dyslexia. No, they cannot diagnose, all right, but there are different assessments and tests that can be done in order to pinpoint the learning disability of dyslexia, all right? So there's categories in which a child you can check it off, if you will, if your child has dyslexia. It's really honestly a no-brainer. And, there's specific things, not all things. It's kind of like a side effect, how you take a medication, it could have 15 side effects, but you only have 5. Same thing. All right. So schools seem to disregard the fact that, oh, this child has 5 things, they don't have the 15 things. So, oh, they don't have dyslexia. So don't fall for that, because that's something that they seem to like to do. And it's not okay. All right. So if your child qualifies as far as having a learning disability on top of, say, autism or a speech and language impairment or whatever the case may be, you need to make sure that that's put into the IEP. A lot of school districts are saying, oh, we can only put one thing into the IEP as far as a disability category, or we can only put 2 things into the IEP as far as a disability category. And that is, in fact, not true. All right. So if they want to put 1 thing or 2 things in a specific area under where it says disability category, fine. If you want to go by the drop down box that you have, that our children are not, we are not drop down boxes, you nor I nor our children. However, what I will say is, fine. I don't care where you put it in the IEP. You can put it on the very last page, but you are going to put that my child is diagnosed with a learning disability, that they tested it in the categories of a learning disability and whatever it is. Okay. You don't get kind of sideswiped, or, don't let them kind of bring in other conversation about something else to kind of disregard the fact that you're saying, hey, my child has XYZ, this is what they were diagnosed with, and we need to get this into the IEP. Because if it's not put into the IEP, then it doesn't reflect what they have. And if you don't reflect what they have in the IEP, then how can the IEP be adequate, right? So you, as the parents, grandparents, caregivers, whatever, you have to ensure and fight for what needs to be put into the IEP. Now, it may not be what their disability category is, and that's okay. All right. So if their disability category is the top 2 things are autism and then speech and language impairment, that's fine. But you don't want to skip the fact that they may have something else, like, dyslexia, learning disability, whatever it may be. If they have dyslexia on top of autism or a speech and language impairment, I would fight for dyslexia to be put into the disability category, because it is that important. All right. Why? Because it's going to affect reading and writing, and reading affects math. All right. Reading and math, believe it or not, go hand in hand. I've said this before, that if you, thanks, Aaron. Hey, Bill, how are you? Hey, Tara. Yeah, so make sure you guys post a 1 below if it's your first through third time catching me live. Post a 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. Make sure to share this. And, it's frustrating because they will say, no, we can't do that. Because if you notice, if you look at your, when you're in your IEP meetings, always have the school district pull up the IEP that you're going through. Say you got a proposed IEP, right? And you're going in and you're addressing the IEP. What you want to do is you want to make sure that your IEP, all right, is gone over step by step with the school district, and do it online. Just always do your IEPs online. It makes it so much easier. And believe it or not, you're not put into that position of just feeling weird and awkward and, I kind of like put on the spot, and, you're able to have all your stuff kind of laid out, and it's a little bit more relaxing at home. You can put it on, turn your screen off if you have to, if you're going to shed a tear or 2, which we all do, right? And you're able to put it on mute if you have to. And it just gives a lot of flexibility. So, one of the things that I always do is I have them bring up the screen of the IEP as we're going through the IEP, okay? And then when we're going through the IEP, the first thing, what do we go through? Is that first page with your name and address and all that. And that's typically where the disability category is. So you don't want to skip that. And then the next part is usually leading into the present levels, all right, which is key, all right, and associates with your disability category, all right. And always, actually, usually before your PLAF, okay, your present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, which is what your IEP is built upon, okay? So it has to be appropriate. You have to know current data, all right? And you have to be able to have it written in such a way that it makes the IEP adequate, all right? So to give you an example, an adequate IEP, all right, is not is not. What it is not. Let's do that, right? So what it is not is so let's just make up a name. Okay, Carrie is a beautiful little girl who loves to please. All right, that's one recently that I've heard. Not the name, but what I've recently read. She loves to please everybody, and she tries her best, and she wants to do well. She loves to swing. She's very sweet, etc., etc. That is not what should be in a present level. Okay, that is talking about your child's personality. That's talking about your child, of how they are. Now, if we were referencing, say, behavior specifically, and we talked a little bit about the personality and so on and so forth, or what triggers them, okay, I will be fine with that. But a little bit, all right? So you want to look at, all right, where is the child currently? All right. Carrie is on a third grade reading level, or it needs to say it first. Carrie is a sixth grade student, all right, at such and such elementary school. She is on a third grade reading level. This is what she is working on in reading. The areas of need are XYZ. Her areas of strength are XYZ, okay, and specifics, okay? If Carrie needs prompting, all right, you don't want it to say Carrie needs a lot of prompting. You don't want that. That doesn't make it adequate because it's not clear and written with clarity and finality, which is important. It has to be written with clarity and finality, or that's a procedural violation. All right. So clarity and finality means that you and I and everybody who reads the IEP can understand it clearly, that what is read is what is meant, and it's where the child is currently. All right. All those areas of need, for example, Carrie is on a third grade reading level, but she's in sixth grade. Well, what does that say? That says that Carrie's 3 years behind. There's a 3-year gap there. So you're able to know that, and that is clear. All right. You also want it put in there as to who said that she is 3 years behind. So, for example, you want it to say the teacher said that, and the teacher's name needs to be there, that Carrie is 3 years behind in reading. And then you want the teacher to then back that up. That statement needs to be backed up with data. Carrie is 3 years behind in reading because whatever the reason, all right? And if they don't know what the reason is, well, that's not okay. That makes the IEP inadequate, not sufficient, and it's definitely not individualized for your child because nobody knows why Carrie is 3 years behind. All right? You cannot accept we don't know. All right? Now, we can accept we don't know if they say we don't know, but we're going to figure it out. Okay? That's different. But if we don't know and you're just going to leave it with this great big question mark, not okay. All right? Lori says, yes, my grandson was acknowledged as to being dyslexic in the 5th grade IEP, but they did not put in his 6th grade IEP. Yeah, and those are things that you have to make sure that you read. I understand that IEPs are very difficult to understand and follow sometimes. I understand that, we miss things, right? I think it's very important for all of us to just be mindful of that. And that's why you want to read it and read it and read it again and read it again. And you don't want to just read it 1 time or 2 times because you're going to miss something. It happens all the time. It's done in an innocent way, of course. And we just have to make sure that we read it and read it again. Because so many times, guys, school systems use what I call trickery. And it's really shady and not cool, We've all, made decisions or done things in our lives where we probably should have been more transparent, right? But it's one of those things where once you kind of live and learn, be transparent, people accept you for who you are or they don't, and you move forward, And the school systems don't seem to do that. And what I mean by that, and, move forward and they make mistakes and so forth, is, okay, if you want to use something and do wrong by a parent and you apologize or decide to make a change and do it differently, okay, people forgive, people let things go. But at the same time, if you continue over and over and over to use trickery for parents and ignore how they're feeling, what's going on, what needs to happen, and writing adequate IEPs, then people don't want to forgive as much. And that's what makes you and me and parents in general very upset. And then it becomes this whole merry-go-round of, when are we going to jump off and fix this? And so one thing to understand is, in an adequate IEP, the services are provided in a coordinated and collaborative manner with all stakeholders. Okay, so when you put an IEP together and it's an adequate IEP, it's one of those things where it's collaborative as a team, you work together and you put that IEP together in the benefit of the student, all right, and based off their needs. And remember, there's only one way in which to get current data and the information you need in order to create an adequate IEP and present level. And that is, okay, assessments. All right. And those assessments have to be surrounded by, where is that student struggling? What type of assessments do we need to do in order to really find out and fine tune where the difficulties and needs are? And sometimes it's not just what is in our face, all right? Sometimes having the ability to expand our minds and figure out that not just your typical cognitive, academic, and your basic general assessments are going to be sufficient. Sometimes you have to do more in-depth assessments, like going to an audiologist, a doctor, and having a full and thorough evaluation. Audiology, typically a lot of times they're speech therapists. That's something that you can keep in mind, that you want an audiologist that is a speech therapist. They're not always. And that really kind of gives you two things in one, to be able to figure out what that child is hearing, what is going in versus what is coming out, and how that can tremendously affect a student in the educational setting. All right. And that could be, the child is showing maybe cognitive issues or low in the cognitive area, or even a child that is low in the academic area, right? But honestly, they would do better had it have been known that the child had auditory processing issues, all right? And that could be visual processing, that can be auditory processing, it can be any type of processing, because the processing piece to learning is so important that I can't even tell you how important that is. Because if there's a processing issue, there's going to be a deficit. And there's going to be a deficit when it comes to academics. There's going to be a deficit when it comes to how that child tests. There's going to be a deficit as to what that child is taking in. So if a teacher is teaching and that child is not absorbing what is being taught, there is a huge deficit there, because they're unable to process what is being told to them. So what then needs to happen? Well, the proper assessments need to be done first. That's first and foremost, right? But then the next thing that has to be done is figuring out, I love this puzzle piece, but it's figuring out, how is this child being affected? What is this processing and the deficit there? How is it impacting this child? And what do we need to do to fix it? And what are the things that we can put into place, for example, accommodations, in order for that child to have the support that they need in order to make progress? If additional assessments have to be done, then that's what needs to be done. All right. But a lot of schools will kind of cut off what assessments that they do, which is why I request certain assessments. And then I'll say to the school, if you don't want to do the request that I ask for, because I'm not saying, hey, just do it Raven's way or the highway. I don't do that. But what I will say is, these are the assessments I want done. There's nothing wrong with the assessments that I want done. A lot of them are amazing assessments, and they're assessments that the school district typically does anyway. All right. Now, what I will say is, in collaboration, these are the ones I want done. Okay. And the only difference in a lot of what I ask for is if a child's nonverbal or if they're a certain age, but they don't tweak that much. Okay. other than if they're nonverbal and they need a nonverbal assessment and that sort of thing. So then I say, but you guys do whatever assessment that you want to do. And on top of that, on top of what I request, any other assessment you choose to do, and I'll even say any other assessment the assessor deems appropriate, leaving them with the ability to do whatever it is that they want. So it's not just Raven's way or the highway. It's, hey, these are what I want, okay? And you guys do whatever you want. And then we have this great assessment that we can put together in order to measure where this child is, in order to be specific of where they are, and to be able to create the proper present levels so that we can then create the IEP, which, you know, from the present levels, we get, okay, what services, what accommodations, what modifications does this child need? And that is what comes about in order to create a adequate, individualized, specified IEP in order for your child, in lieu of their disability, to make progress. Okay? So another thing is it has to be specifically designed for their unique needs, right? So no matter what those needs are, it has to be supported by services that will permit your child to benefit from the instruction in which they are being given. Okay? Hi, Irene. How are you? Yes, post a 1 below if it's your first through third time catching me live. Post a 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. Make sure to share this. And I appreciate you guys joining me. I know that I am not myself as of yet. You know, I'm still fighting COVID. I'm like so freaking over it at this point. But it is what it is. I'm on day 10. They say you're supposed to feel better day 10 through 14, but I'm not. So I'm like, okay, I feel okay for this moment. And then I just feel horrible. And then I feel okay for a moment and then horrible again. But whatever. Hopefully I have the immunities and I don't have to think about it again. And it sucks because, like, whether you got the vaccination or not, the strain I got, which is the Delta variant, it like is not it's not covered by the vaccination, you know, that people are getting. So it's like I was totally screwed coming back from Florida, being there the week that they had the highest jump of people get COVID. I think it was like 246,000 people the week I was in Destin, Florida, that got COVID, you know, throughout the whole state. But I'm like, of course, I get it, of course. So anyway, moving forward. Here's something that's really interesting, a case that I'm looking at right here that I've used a lot. It's a case in Texas, and I'm using it to write this request for due process that I'm writing right now. And it talks about so many different things that are so important. So one of the things that it talks about in regards to individualization is the IEP being sufficiently individualized, meaning designed for that child's unique needs, as we talked about, but also the IEP must provide services that address all of those disabilities, and the services need to address not just one disability, but all of them. Okay? So when your child is provided services, speech, OT, whatever it may be, they cannot just be given one service to cover something that they have as a deficit and then all others be ignored. That can't happen. Okay? Another thing that you want to keep in mind is anything within your child's IEP based on data. That's why assessments are so important. You cannot allow the school to leave them unaddressed. They need to be addressed. All right. One of the things that I've seen so many times recently, well, more than recently, let's just get real, right? Is children who have a speech and language impairment disorder. They say different things in IEPs. In all honesty, it should say impairment. And the children are receiving, this one child that I have on my caseload is receiving 20 minutes 3 times a month. I'm like, what the hell is this? You know, like, this child has a speech and language impairment. They have a ton of issues with receptive language and pragmatics. And you're telling me that 20 minutes 3 times a month is sufficient? Like, are y'all out of your damn mind? I mean, these are the things that just drive me crazy as an advocate. All right, it wore me out last year, burnt me out, because I'm dealing with all these children that are getting the crap end of the stick, if you will, and school districts are just thinking it's okay. And then they're not recommending anything different, but they know that the child is behind. They know that the child is struggling in these areas. They actually even, here's the stupidest thing, is they document that the student is, behind or delayed or has needs in all these areas. Or shoot, just look at the fact that the disability category is speech and language impairment, but then they're going to say 3 times a week at 20 minutes. I don't get it. It's almost like they're saying, "Oh yeah, this child has all these needs that need to be addressed in order to specifically have a designed IEP that is adequate and individualized." But we're just going to offer this because mom doesn't know any better, and we're going to get away with it. That's what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, Raven comes into play, and they're like, holy shit, okay, no problem. We'll give you da 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 da. But why does it have to get to that point? I have parents that are like, I've been fighting and fighting, and they're not listening to me. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, why? That's one thing I've tried to think lately. Post below if you guys have any thought process on this. Don't be afraid. Post it below. What are your thoughts on why school districts are not listening to parents? Why is it that they just kind of blow you off? Or why is it that they tell you what you want to hear, but don't make any changes? Or they'll say, we're gonna change it, we're gonna do this. And then you kind of forget about it. I can't tell you how many times I did that, guys. And then a month, 2 months, 3 months, even a year goes by, and then you're livid because it never changed. Because it just came, you just thought about it again because you let it go. I did that so many times, y'all. I would accept the fact that they said what they said. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and then they didn't do what they said they were going to do. Because a lot of times they know we are minorities and cannot afford legal representation, so they get away with, well, I'm not a legal representation, I'm an advocate. But yes, I hear what you're saying, Liz. Because they have an agenda and it isn't good. Yeah. They underestimate us, maybe thinking we are too busy being parents. Yeah, and a lot of times, though, Rose, that we are, and we have other kids and we have other things on our plates. And a lot of times we do forget. I know I did. I have 2 other children, older children from, Skylar. And I remember, because they were older, like Skylar and my oldest daughter are 10 years apart, and then Skylar and my son are 5. And so they would say to me, Mom, you give her so much attention, you just like ignore us, And that was never the intention, but I was so focused on getting Skylar what she needed that, the other kids did not get as much attention from me because I was so focused on that. Who's been in that situation before? And so that kept me, very busy with 3 kids and trying to please everyone, which totally didn't happen. And, it's important to give yourself a break, though, in the sense of, hey, we're not perfect and we're going to forget, But kind of coming back to the table and just being more mindful of that and making sure things are done and done in the way they say they're going to do it right away. So then there's no forgetting. All right. And always following up an IEP in writing as to exactly what was agreed upon, along with the fact that every IEP you need to record. I don't care if you're a 2-party state. It doesn't mean that you don't tell them, okay, and agree or whatever, but you record that IEP. You tell them, you record it, I'll record it, we're both covered. And make sure that's done. If you're 1 party, don't say anything. I always say something in my first email. I don't repeat myself again. I'm not your babysitter. I'll do it 1 time if you're a 1-party state, and I put it in my first email. Other than that, that's it. If you don't listen and read that email, that's your problem. All right? In a two-party state, I will put it in that first email again, and same thing. Because if they don't respond to it, then that's pretty much them saying okay. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't, remind them again or whatever. In the state of California, it's 24 hours, okay? So, and California is a stickler when it comes to a lot of things, and they do the whole 24-hour thing. So, just make sure that that is something that you just be mindful of, and, stick with your state laws and understand that you need to give them that notice. So that's something that is very, very important. All right. One thing that I want to kind of leave you with in just covering the adequacy of IEPs, what an adequate individualized IEP is, as I was explaining, and you understanding that if the IEP is not adequate based on relevant current data, it's not adequate. And it's definitely not individualized because children change. All right. I'm dealing with a student, two of them actually right now, where they have not even been evaluated in 6 years. The school district decided to do a read instead. Now, can a school system in place of a evaluation assessment do a read? Yes. But what's happened in this situation is the parents did not realize that they did that instead of doing a complete assessment. They were never told the difference. They didn't know. So the parents telling me, they said they did an evaluation, this year, and this year. So I'm looking back at all the documents that they gave me, and I'm seeing that there was no formal assessment done, only a read, which is a review of existing data. All right, so it's just reviewing subjective information, which is notes from the teacher, notes from whoever. All right, and no solid data is provided. So that triennial that is required was kind of missed, ignored, and the read was done instead, and the parent was then told that an evaluation was done. So that there was that trickery of, hey, we're going to do a read. Oh, we did an evaluation, but the parent didn't realize that the read and a formal evaluation were different from one another. So they assumed that the evaluation was done. It's unfortunate. All right. So the other thing that you need to understand, all right, if an IEP is adequate, all right, and based off of current data, there is a demonstrated, okay, it's called a demonstrated benefit, all right, which means, all right, the IEP must produce progress, not regression, all right, or trivial progress. All right, trivial is like that same word as diminish, all right, that you've heard possibly with the court case Andrew versus Douglas, all right, which is trivial, a small amount, not enough to be sufficient, that is demonstrated educational benefit. So an adequate IEP equals demonstrated educational benefit of your child, all right, and it must be meaningful, all right, and that is what is very important. In this case that I'm talking to you about, where the child, all right, interesting enough, I'm sure you guys can relate to this, some of you, where the school system said, oh, your child's on grade level. They're doing great. They have A's and B's. They're in the gen ed classroom. They don't need any support. They're doing amazing, and they're passing all their grades. They're passing all their classes. They're doing great. So the judge in this case, even though the child was struggling in reading, all right, they didn't test him in dyslexia. They didn't test him and assess him in multiple different areas, but they said that he was passing all of his classes. Well, the judge then says it doesn't matter if he's passing all of his classes, that if he still has a deficit in a certain area, the assessment has to be done, the proper assessments have to be done, and you need to figure out what the area of need is and create goals based around that area of need. And him passing his classes has nothing to do with the fact that he was not assessed in certain areas that he is struggling in that you are not addressing. Then the teacher testified and said, well, the student, all right, appears to be doing really good and has a positive attitude and seems to be really excited about doing better, et cetera, et cetera. And the exact words was, in addition to DC, DC is the name of the student. All right, they just do the first letter and the last letter, of their name. Grades and test scores. The district emphasizes the testimony of DC's teacher that by the end of 5th grade, DC was able to read aloud with confidence. The teacher said and testified that the child was able to read aloud with confidence. All right. And the judge says because the teacher's perception of DC's confidence is entirely subjective, the evidence is of limited value. So the judge is basically saying, that's nice. Thank you for telling me that the confidence was boosted, that he's doing okay, so you say, but because this is subjective data and your opinion, it's neither here nor there, and the importance of it and the evidence is of limited value because it's your opinion. All right? So that's something to keep in mind, that who cares if the school is saying, oh, they're doing great. That is a red flag to me. When a school district, oh, they're passing all their grades, they're A's and B's, they're doing amazing, there's not a problem in the world. Okay, if there's not a problem in the world, why do they have an IEP? If there's not a problem in the world, where is the data to show that my child's doing amazing? I don't want to hear what you have to say. I want to see the data. So what do you have that isn't your mouth telling me something in regards to my child? Show me something that I can have in my hands and look at, okay, my child tested here at the beginning of the school year, tested here in the middle of the school year, and then tested here at the end of the school year, So you have your fall, winter, spring, right? So then you're able to measure progress in a way that is reasonably calculated, and you're able to really follow that in the proper way. Hey, Cindy, how are you? Thank you. I'm hopefully on the mend. We'll see. So hopefully that gives you guys some, a little bit of substance, if you will, when it comes to adequate IEPs, how they're created, what is so important about that, why individualization is key, and making sure that you don't get sucked into that trickery. All right. So we are going to be addressing a lot in the coming days when it comes to your IEPs, because me, especially in the beginning of the year, well, throughout the year, really, I want to make sure your IEPs are what? On point. All right. We are creating a t-shirt that says my IEP present levels are what? On point. Okay. So your IEP has to be on point, it has to be individualized, and it has to be adequate. And if it's not, then your child's IEP is not based upon what is individually appropriate for them and their needs, which is going to then result in them not making sufficient progress. All right. And just like this judge says, all right, for them to have an appropriate and adequate IEP, that means that their progress is more than trivial, and that it is meaningful, and that they have educational success. Okay? All right, so Lori says that this is exactly what has happened with me, with getting helps changed for his specific needs. Now he's in 6th grade, and it's documented that he is at a 3.5 reading level because this past year and him getting this help was next to none. He's got a learning disability that is documented as a stutter, dyslexia, only in late 4th grade. Then COVID hits. He has an IQ level that is just over the 70 mark, which they keep saying exempts him from certain helps. That is not true at all. What do I do to get this changed? The school psychologist did assessments in October 2021. Okay, so door-to-door transport, I'm going to answer that really quick. Door-to-door transportation for a child with special needs is a must. That's a provision of FAPE. So if a child has special needs, they're on a special needs bus, then it's automatic door-to-door. Okay, so if your child's on a gen ed bus because they're able to function in that way, in that capacity on a gen ed bus, which is not typically likely for a lot of children with special needs because it's just too much, too loud, too much going on. Then if it is a sped bus, by law, it has to be door to door. Okay? Hopefully that helps. Okay. Lori, back to you. So I would have to see the psychologist evaluation that they did in October 2021. All right. That is typically what gives me insight as to where that child is. Is that evaluation even adequate enough? Because that's one thing I have seen a lot of, is a lot of the school's evaluations, and I'll go into this. This was going to be another talk, but I will mention this. A lot of assessments that the schools are doing are what I will call half-assed, and they are not sufficient. They are lacking recommendations, and they're lacking the areas in which we need to focus on. A sufficient and appropriate evaluation needs to not only have, what was evaluated, what assessment was done, how that child's behavior was that day, what were they like, did they focus, did they not focus, were they, acting out, what was it that was transpiring, like basically the antecedent of that day. Then how were they assessed? Were you reading to them? Did they read it on their own? How was the evaluation provided? There's lots of questions that can be asked to find out how exactly that assessment was done. Then once you understand that portion, then you want to make sure that the scoring charts are there. When you look at the scoring charts, you don't want to see just the SS, the standard score, or you don't want to just see the percentile. All right, you want to see the raw score, you want to see the percentile, you want to see the standard score, but you want to know what it says to be average, not average, below average, all these different things. And that's going to lead me into my next conversation with you guys, which is, what does that mean? All right, what does that mean? What does it mean when Pearson, the company, says this is average, this is below average, this is, I don't know, what is it? Low average, I think, is one of them. There's all these different things, all right? And I bet you what is being failed to be said is what that means and how it really doesn't matter, okay? So, and that's not typically the number you want, or the wording, low average, below average, average, whatever, is important. It's not important. And it has nothing to do with your individualized student. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow or the next day, depending on how I feel. But we're going to just be building on appropriate, adequate IEPs, making sure that they're in order, making sure they're on point, making sure your present levels are where they need to be, making sure everything is together so that your child has a wonderful year. This year is going to be different for everybody. And, for some reason, a lot of governors are mandating school for special needs children, and some governors are not. Some governors are making sure that, masks are worn. There's students that won't even wear a mask, then kids are being denied going to school because they won't wear a mask, and it's just going to be a mess in just maybe a different capacity than last year. So we need to be mindful of that, and we need to make sure, because school systems and school districts are way past frustrated and stressed out right now because of lack of teachers, because of the stress that's put on them, all of these different things. So it is our job to make sure that the laws are followed, policies are adhered to, and, our children get what they need and what is appropriate for them. All right. I don't want to hear things from school districts that are along the lines of, oh, well, we don't do that. We've never done that before. I don't really care. We need to do what's needed for this child, period. I don't care if you have to contract out. I don't care what it is that you have to do. You have to do what is necessary in order for this child to make progress. And whatever it is that they're possibly doing that is not ensuring that they're making progress, they have to change. All right? And the fact that they haven't recommended it already is a violation within its own. All right? So, is that information true? What information? I was told with transportation only be provided if your child goes to residence school. What is that? What's a residence school? Am I like not, is that not clicking with me, or explain that? Cindy says they're fighting me on it. We even had an IEP meeting just for it. I don't know why. They shouldn't at all. I don't know what residence school is. So, like, if you want to tell me what you mean by that, but if a child is provided an IEP, that school district has. My child was initially placed to school not within your area. So, meaning like your school district is the same, but your child's school is not the home school. Is that what you mean? So there's like, you're in the same school district, but there's, let's just say 15 schools within that school district, and your child is going to one of those schools, but not their home school. Is that what you mean, Rose? Okay, that is incorrect. So whatever, if your child has an IEP and is within your school district, okay, that doesn't mean the home school. That means within the school district, all right? All the high schools, all the elementary schools, all the middle schools, right? They have to provide transportation unless you move out of the school district. Okay, then that's different. Then it's whatever school district of where you're at. Okay, but each school district has to provide transportation for your child on a special needs bus if that's what they're at. And that's what has to happen. If they told you that, oh, we can only provide transportation to your home school, they're full of shit. 100%. And that's what I would say to them. You are full of shit and you're not providing my child FAPE. And I would definitely nail their ass to the wall with FAPE. I can guarantee you say that, they're gonna change things real quick. You're not providing my child FAPE. You lied to me and said that my child could only have a special needs bus if they went to their home school, which is in fact not true. You lied to me, and you're now not providing my child FAPE and haven't provided my child FAPE in this amount of time. On top of that, Rose, that's a 504 violation, which is an OCR violation, and what is considered, with what they're saying to you in the lie, discrimination. So they're in deep shit. Hopefully that helps. Gotcha, Bill. You're welcome. All right, guys. I will see you guys tomorrow, the next day. Hopefully you enjoyed the information today. And we will address a lot more things to come. I've been told, when are you taking more people? When are you taking more people? Well, hopefully in the next week, I will be healthy enough. I already have quite a few clients, but I will have 4 openings come the end of the month. All right, so you're welcome to message me and we can get started. But I will have 4 spots available come the end of the month. But you're welcome to message me now on WhatsApp and we will get going and addressing the issues. So hopefully this helped, and I will talk to you guys very, very soon. If I don't get to your questions or anything like that, just post them below. I promise I'll answer them. And we'll go from there. I will talk to you guys soon. Have a wonderful evening.